everyone, and thanks for listening to The Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with a new guest, Tracey Bear, Manager of Audit Services here at Core Business Solutions. Glad you could join us.
Thanks, Xavier. X, as I commonly refer to you.
Yes. Everybody can call me X. That's not a problem.
I'm really glad to be here. I have been a very long-time listener of the Quality Club, and I even learn a lot from listening to them being in Audit Services. So exciting to be here, and I'm excited about the conversation today and sharing some of my insights and looking forward to the chat.
Awesome. Well, again, we're glad to have you here. Finally, you get to do more than listen. You get to be on it. And we're going to talk about common pitfalls of internal auditing and programs that businesses have doing that. But before we do, let's learn a little bit about Tracy and her journey. Could you share a little bit about your history, where you're from, what you've done, and all that?
Sure. So to begin with, as most of you are probably aware, the accent is Australian. I've been in the US for over 9 years now. Unfortunately, the accent's never going away. My auditing, I guess, started a long time ago. I'm not going to tell you when because I'm not going to give away my age here. Originally, I began as a rocket scientist all those years ago. Gradually moved over into operational excellence and quality assurance and compliances.
Awesome.
Over the years, I've worked across multiple industries, from manufacturing, construction, IT, and now I'm in services, which has really helped me understand how flexible yet powerful the ISO standards are when they're actually applied properly.
That's
now,
awesome.
As you're aware, I'm the manager of Audit Services at Core. I lead a team that supports organisations in strengthening their internal audit systems, not just for compliance, but hopefully the aim is for real tangible improvements. I'm passionate about making audits less about just ticking a box and more meaningful conversations with our customers to drive that passion that I have for improvement into them as well.
Well, that's great. So you're somebody that can literally say to somebody, listen, it's not rocket science. Right? Because you've studied for that, but that's a lot of history and a great way to look at that. We're so glad you're here today. So let's get started. Why is an internal audit so important?
Well, the first thing I like talking about is it's not just about the general importance. I like to try and stress that it's not just a tick the box exercise.
Okay.
Audits, even though they're about compliance, they're not just about compliance either. Like, yes, compliance is important. It's absolutely critical that everybody's compliant, but it's very beneficial at identifying gaps that lead to operational failures. And these failures in turn can cause loss of business reputation or even financial issues within an organization. Mm-hmm. So helping them identify these and, do corrective actions to happen before these things happen is extremely beneficial.
Yes.
The big point I really enjoy about auditing, as I've already mentioned, is the whole continual improvement aspect. You want to improve operational efficiency. They get rid of old things that organizations use that may be redundant, taking time, slowing things down, which then help improve costs and streamline everything. Mm-hmm. This, in turn, will improve the performance of an organization. It improves quality. It improves customer satisfaction, which is something that every organisation should aim to achieve.
Yeah.
You're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your customers, you're even doing it for your employees. So all those continual improvements are a great benefit.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of ISO 9001 in reality is continuous improvement.
Absolutely. And I'm of the belief, and I'm a continual learner myself. I'm constantly learning. I do not know everything, but I strongly believe in a second set of eyes to look at the things that you do are very beneficial because you get complacent. It's not any personal bias. It's someone just looking at something and saying, hey, look, have you thought about this or maybe doing it this way? And when you work in a process for so long, you get so ingrained in that same day, same structure, same everything, that second person may see something that you have not seen. And It's not a case of you not doing your job right or anything like that. It's just a case of you've always done it that way, and that second set of eyes will challenge those, assumptions and belief that maybe I could do this better.
Yeah. I know in video editing for years and graphics and stuff like that, one of my weak points is spelling. And it's just a typo. Very easy for me to do. And, before I would get embarrassed. And then I started working a place where this one lady, we called her Eagle Eye because she could see everything that was just not right. And I would have her check everything because that was her strength. And for me, a lot of times when you're working, especially in video production, you're looking at 50 things on a screen. So it's really easy to be looking at, color temperature and making sure things are in focus and how's the background look and all that stuff. And then this little graphic that's over here in the bottom corner that you said, okay, I threw that in, but I misspelled somebody's name. Maybe there was two spellings, okay, two different ways to say Sandra or something like that, or Sandy or whatever. Having that other set of eyes was so great and so crucial. And the same thing here, you're just having somebody that might take that extra look, fresh eyes, and making it, better in the long run.
Absolutely.
Can you tell me some of the reasons why people might not be prepared for their internal audits besides just, we didn't get to it? What are some reasons?
Some companies, instead of making ISO part of their daily operations, just see it as another task they have to do. And it may be a task that's been required of them from other areas of management or those kinds of things. And they tend to treat it as a one and done kind of event. And so when the audit comes around, there's all this last minute scrambling to get everything into compliance and documents completed and making sure everyone's prepared. So they don't take that time to, on a day-to-day basis, go through an audit. Making sure that every day is part of, the ISO system. It's in everything we do. Organizations don't communicate the planning around an internal audit, like who's actually required to be on an audit and participate. So if they're not informed early enough, they may have other things on their plates or other plans, and it gets pushed to the side.
Yeah.
There's that lack of understanding of what the scope of an audit is, the timeline, and, what's actually expected in an audit. We need to see documented evidence is a big one. Making sure that those people who know where that evidence is are available. And even audits that are that can be scheduled, sometimes the roles and responsibilities aren't clear and no one takes full responsibility of the whole process.
So really communicating the who, what, where, when.
Yeah, absolutely. And without that accountability and clear who's responsible, the tasks fall through the cracks and the organization may be unprepared.
What about it being effective? What does it require?
Well, one of the things is it's not just about paperwork. It's not just about, someone getting in there and talking. Everything that we talk about, we need to be backed up by evidence. We need to make sure that the processes are being followed consistency by the process owners, the people responsible in those fields. The audit process also involves a participation of a very diverse group of individuals across the organization, not just top management who should be participating in the internal audit, but you've got people like human resources, you've got people who do purchasing, and any other individuals responsible for any of the key processes that need to be examined should be part of that internal audit. Because having the right people involved means that they're open to those discussions about internal improvements and those kinds of things, and they're making and adjusting and taking notes and listening and learning at the same time. And they themselves also know where that evidence is, so there's none of that scrambling trying to find, a receipt from a purchase or, a delivery note that the delivery team might be holding on to.
Right.
And it just helps, strengthen the effectiveness of the whole management system if everyone participates.
Yeah. You're not calling John in the middle of one of his meetings going, hey, where does this reside?
Absolutely.
And we can also talk about why core is important for that to help you keep a lot of that documented information. But we'll save that for another time. Really good, really, really, really good stuff here. So next question is about everyone's favorite subject, which you talked a little bit about it, documentation. What type of documentation is often found missing? You did mention, documented evidence, but what else?
So a lot of the evidence that we seem to find missing or frequently missing in internal audits can tend to be some of the things where conversations or things happen, but they're not physically documented.
Okay.
So we're looking at things like training records and attendance records of those trainings to demonstrate employees are receiving that training that's available. We want to see that people are competent for their roles.
Right.
I do find in the service-based industries that I do audit a lot, maintenance records are often required to prove that equipment and systems are regularly checked. Manufacturers are pretty good at keeping maintenance records, but service companies tend not to understand that, even if they don't own a building, they're still responsible for the maintenance of that building. So things like making sure fire extinguishers are in service, and that their IT systems are being backed up, and they've got all those kinds of things in place to prevent, failures or downtime.
Your redundancy for systems, you rely on one laptop and there's no backups if somebody isn't working.
Absolutely. There's probably two more areas that I tend to see. One of the things that frequently get overlooked is change management. It's required by the standards to make sure you manage change, anything that affects your system. And though they're very good at changing their documents and making sure they're controlling them adequately, changes in processes or equipment or other parts of the management system, they don't formally document, whether it be a conversation recorded in a management review minutes or whether it actually be through a formal change management form, which shows us that they're controlling and approving and risk assessing all these changes that happen.
Right. The reason that's important is you need to make sure everybody is aware of these changes and communicate it properly to everybody that it affects, from the workers all the way up.
Absolutely. And risk needs to be considered. What areas are going to be affected will be part of that risk that they do in that change management.
Where else may you find documentation being missing?
Supplier evaluations is probably a big one, and completing annual reviews of suppliers. So the supplier evaluation part is an organisation gets to tell us what they do for their supplier evaluations, and we audit based on that. So if you formally don't say that you only audit or you only do supplier reviews on, say, your key suppliers and list them out, we have to, any supplier we see, we have to go, okay, so where's the supplier review? And these tend to be forgotten, that it's all suppliers that can be reviewed, and that evidence just seems to be lacking and poorly managed.
I can see where it's either make sure you pick who you're going to review or realize all of them can be reviewed.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
No, they're probably the big ones that primarily I see. But the biggest one, as I said, would be, managing changes is important.
That is. And a lot of people don't think about it until they do get involved in a QMS. It just kind of happens. Yeah. Great details. So one aspect of a QMS that has been impressed upon our listeners over many, 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 many episodes is management has to be engaged. So how does the lack of management engagement negatively affect internal audits?
I tend to find if management isn't involved itself in the internal audit, they tend not to be overly ingrained in regards to the QMS system-wide. Okay. So if they're not involved in the audit and they're not hearing those discussions that we're having and they're not hearing the feedback from their employees live, they can miss some of the crucial things that we discuss that don't necessarily get documented in a report. The leadership involvement, it sets a tone for the rest of the organisation, and it makes sure that the organisation, if they're ingrained in the audit and they're aware of the audit and they're helping prep for the audit with, their team members, they're making sure that feeling of how important an audit is conveyed to the rest of the organisation, and they take it serious. It becomes ingrained in the organisation. And instead of it just being a haphazard, poorly prioritised audit activity that lack any focus, top leadership drive this and go, okay, so what can we change? What can we do? Where can we improve? And that philosophy flows down through the team. And instead of it just becoming a routine administrative type task, the mindset changes through to that continual improvement. Right. Let's work on, where are those corrective actions? And it completely changes an organization's attitudes if it's coming driven from top management.
Yeah, if they're kind of laissez-faire about it, why would anybody else consider its importance?
Absolutely. And that in itself could help jeopardize the maintenance of compliance, and it stops the improving of process, and it can help prevent, the quality objectives being achieved if top management aren't aware and in somewhat participating in making sure an internal audit is a value add for the organization. Yeah.
Wonderful take on that one. So, Tracy, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Instead of looking at internal audits as something to just check off a list, the checkbox, how should a company look at it for continuous improvement? You've talked to it a little bit throughout this podcast, but can you kind of narrow it down into the details there?
Absolutely. When you've got a team or a group of individuals who approach an audit with the right mindset, they see that it provides for them an objective and a very structured way to show gaps, inefficiencies, and potential risks within existing processes. Mm-hmm. That insight helps them proactively address any issues before they cause any issues or non-conformities and escalate and cause issues within an organization. Mm-hmm. That gives a good enhancement across all the departments. Instead of fearing an audit, teams can view them as helpful feedback that will highlight strengths and areas for improvement so they can step back themselves after an audit and go, okay, so we talked about this. What areas can I see after the audit for the next 12 months or 6 months till the next audit can I improve on to make sure that whole philosophy of ingraining that quality perspective and continual improvement is across the organization.
Yeah.
And if we get those employees to engage at all levels during the process, the organizations foster a sense of ownership and accountability, and they encourage, collaboration and open communication with everybody. So it's very inclusive. It's not this person works this process. It becomes a whole ingrained into the organization structure where they journey together towards that operational excellence, where everybody feels empowered and that they have a vote to help, contribute to quality, the compliance objectives, and that whole continual improvement philosophy, which is a great feeling for a person to feel like that they are part of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having those people on the ground, the boots on the ground, really involved, seeing your interest as a manager, saying, hey, this is important and I need your help. What better way could somebody feel valued and then have buy-in and then continually want to work and make it more of a continuous improvement thing?
Absolutely. And then by doing that, it shifts the perception of internal audits from just being a compliance burden to a strategic asset. So companies then embed that continuous improvement into their culture, which, drives growth and resilience over time. And that's a huge benefit to an organization. And the cost savings just in making sure that everyone is being ingrained and making sure that they're doing the right things and they're doing their own health checks, prior to an internal audit, and they come into that audit, prepared and ready to be proud and say, look at all the things that we've done in the last 12 months. It's a really nice feeling.
Yeah, it really is. Well, this is great. I do have a really quick added on question. This is more of a smaller one, but you said in internal audits every 6 months, every year. I think a lot of people probably say, okay, we need to do our internal audits before we do our final audit or our hey, we got our surveillance audit coming up here. We need to get our internal audits done. Do you find that maybe it's better sometimes to do them a little more frequently just to help keep them in a process that keeps your focus on it?
I honestly believe that within a company, that one big internal audit that does is a fantastic compliance, check and balance, continual improvement, putting in and making sure everything's okay. But there's nothing in the structure that says that companies can't do their own little checks and balance throughout the year to make sure they're compliant. So whether they decide every quarter, hey, let's take a look at this process and let's get someone else from this area to have a look at it and see if there's anything there that we can help improve before the internal audit or any other suggestions, anything that's going to drive that is absolutely, great.
So maybe you don't call them internal audits as such, but you're doing the reviews that really need to be there ahead of time.
Absolutely. So
you're not doing it all at once. And then I couldn't imagine, if you need something for evidence and you did it from 11 and a half months ago, where's somebody going to remember that is, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this has really been great and insightful. Do you have any last thoughts on this?
One of the big things I like to explain to the customers is that even if we do that internal audit, we do find a non-conformance. We're not non-conforming people, we're non-conforming processes. So it's all part of that continual improvement of, hey, look, we've looked at that process. It's not quite there yet. Let's fix that and work out ways to fix it. So for me, that internal audit gets people more engaged. Be open, be honest. We want all the skeletons out of the closet. We want to make sure that an internal audit sets you up for success via external audit.
Yep, absolutely. Well, really appreciate that. Again, wonderful talking with you. I know you and I worked on a team for a little while together, and it's great to finally get you on a podcast. I've been trying to for probably since we started, and I convinced you to do one, and it's been fabulous information.
Absolutely. Thank you, Xavier. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. If you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, as we're now an LRQA company, and how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, even with your internal audits, as we do have an internal audit team, or even some customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, please be sure to do so. That way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.